Hello and welcome to another episode of Two Guys and a Chainsaw. I'm Todd.
And I'm Craig.
Today we are diving into the early 90s, late 80s with a film called Popcorn. This movie hit the theaters, didn't make a huge splash. In fact, it didn't really get seen much at all, although I think it did a little bit of business much later on home video. It does seem to have a bit of a cult following, although, again, not a huge cult following. Almost just a kind of under-the-radar movie that, I don't know, after watching it for the very first time, I'm not sure it deserves that under-the-radar status. I wouldn't say it's a fantastic movie, but it does have a certain charm about it that I found compelling, really, despite its shortcomings. But this was the first time I'd ever seen it in my life.
Wow.
How about you, Craig?
Oh, no, I had seen it several times. I think I remember renting it when I was a kid and watching it with my cousins and stuff. And I feel like I have fond memories of it. And watching it again, I mean, I've seen it since then, you know, in my adulthood, but it's been a long time. And watching it again, I understand why I had fond memories of it. I think it's kind of fun. You know, it's no masterpiece, but I think that it's got a really interesting premise, and there's some cool stuff going on here. It's kind of an homage to old school B-movie horror. I like it. I like the central plot line, but I think that what was most fun for me are all of the movies within the movie. Those are really fun, and I'm sure we'll talk about them a lot.
Yeah, they're really well done. These movies within the movie are the kind of movies that I used to watch a lot as a kid. My dad was a child of the 50s and early 60s, and so he was really big on these black and white B movies, you know, Them and Attack of the 50-Foot Woman and stuff like that. And our video shelf at home was just full of this stuff. And so it was very accessible to me. It was the kind of thing that I grew up on, really had a passion for. And I still enjoy those kind of movies. They're usually pretty silly and cheesy, and the acting is bad. And all of that is really highlighted by this film when this group of film students, it's like a film club at an extension of the University of California, which is a surprisingly ragtag and small film club for the University of California. But they're kind of an interesting group of people. There's a guy in a wheelchair. There's a girl who's working on her script. She's kind of our central character here. Her name is Maggie Butler, and she is walking around with a handheld tape recorder all the time, recording ideas for her script. She has a kind of boyfriend. Not really. He pops in and out. He's interested in her, but she seems to be dead focused on her screenplay. Anyway, it's like a small group of people who decide that they're not going to get the funding that they need from the school to do what they want to do. And so their idea is to throw a crazy horror sci-fi marathon one night at this local rundown theater that's going to be torn down in like 3 days. And so they spruce it up and they do their show. And in the midst of all of this, there's a killer on the loose.
Right. Yeah. I mean that's it, you know. And there's kind of this central mystery thing going on. Maggie, who, gosh, I had her name written down, I thought.
Jill Sholin.
Yeah, okay. I just read, because I just finished watching this movie, and so I was just doing some research, that she actually was not the original actress that was cast. The original actress that was cast was another actress of the late 80s, early 90s who I didn't immediately recognize when I looked at her picture, but when I looked at her filmography, she was the oldest sister in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Yep.
I guess they shot the vast majority of this movie with her, and then at the very last minute, they replaced her. And I didn't read anything about why. I have no idea. All I know is that this new actress who came in said that she barely interacted with the cast at all, because most of what she did were just like close-up reshoot shots.
Yeah. What a shame, right?
I know.
For her.
For her, right? Yeah, I don't think that I would have noticed. It seems pretty seamless. It doesn't feel cut and pasted together, even though it seems like maybe that's kind of the case.
It might explain a little bit of the weirdness. Like there's some scenes, that it's like this theater's a madhouse of people coming in. It's just filled to the brim with folks in all this dress. Like they're dressed up like aliens or dressed like whatever in the lobby and in the theater, and people are in there and moving back and forth. But then there are scenes of the same event where there's absolutely nobody in the lobby but like 3 of these people.
Yeah.
And the front doors are locked and it's all quiet outside. And then like 2 scenes later, suddenly the lobby's chock full of people again and it's a mayhem. I wonder if maybe some of that was due to reshoots. They just didn't bring back all the extras for those scenes.
Maybe, I don't know. I want to get back to what you were talking about because that was pretty awesome. But it starts out with kind of this mystery where Maggie is having these weird dreams. And that's how, the very first thing we see are these like strangely realistic face masks like floating in some sort of fluid, and that's it. Like it's totally out of context. That's all we see. And then we get into Maggie's dream, and she's having this weird surreal dream where there's like explosions and a young girl in white like running and some creepy guy, and like then his head is like on a table, and there's this big dagger, and there's fire, and you hear a woman's voice calling the name Sarah, and then Maggie wakes up and she dictates it into her little tape recorder. Apparently she's been having these dreams for a while. We see her mother, played by one of my favorites, Dee Wallace.
Yeah. I know that's why you picked this movie.
Honest to God, I had forgotten that she was in it. I really didn't remember that she was in it. And when I saw that she was, I was,
Oh, you were just blown away. Oh my gosh, Dee Wallace is in this? I had no idea.
All right, believe me, don't believe me, I don't care. But Dee Wallace, I mean, she plays a minor role in this movie, but she looks amazing. My God, I don't know that I've ever seen her look better, but she looks fantastic. But she is Maggie's, let's just say, air quotes, mom, and she gets this weird, kind of phone call with somebody with a raspy voice, I don't know. I think the first thing he says is like, remember who the 9th circle of hell is reserved for. I don't even know what that means, but whatever. But she's getting these creepy calls. Maggie's having these dreams. So that's the initial setup kind of for the mystery. And then what you said, we meet this group of ragtag kids who are aspiring filmmakers, and they need the funding, so they're going to set up this thing. What's so funny is, to me, it's Toby's idea. Toby is played by Tom Villard, who is so recognizable to me.
Yeah.
He's this tall, kind of lanky guy, and he has this really interesting affect to the way that he talks that is so familiar to me. And I thought, oh my gosh, he must have been in a million things. And I looked at his page, and he was in quite a bit, but not really a lot that I remembered. Frankly, I think that what I remembered him from was the one episode of The Golden Girls that he was in. I love The Golden Girls.
Yeah. Well, he was in One Crazy Summer. I think I used to watch that a lot on TV.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was in Grease too as well. And I don't know about you guys, but my sisters and I, for some stupid reason, had Grease 2 on like a never-ending repeat at our house.
Oh, it's such a terrible movie.
It is a terrible movie.
But yeah, I mean, if you're like us and you grew up in the 80s and 90s, you would totally recognize this guy. But it's his idea to do this horror marathon, and they're going to show these old B movies. Their gimmick is that all of these movies, when they were originally released, were released with some sort of gimmick. And so, like, they're going to show Mosquito, which was filmed in Projectovision.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to show The Stench, which was shot in Odoroscope. And they're going to show, like, The Amazing Adventures of the Electrical Man or something like that was in Shaka Scope.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shakarama. And so they set up all these gags. And you talked about how, everybody's in costume and stuff. I just, when it all started, when they get it all going, I just was thinking, oh my God, I want to go to this so bad.
Yeah, I know.
Like, it looked like so much fun.
And all of these things, all of these gimmicks for these movies, these are actual gimmicks that were used, stolen directly from William Castle, who was a famous producer of these kinds of films. And every single movie that he did, he had some gimmick like this to do. It would be something simple like, oh, we're selling insurance policies if you die of fright during the movie, or you have to sign a waiver. We're going to have a nurse on standby if you die of fright. But then he had these movies like The House on Haunted Hill, which is a great Vincent Price movie actually, that used Emergo technology, and it was very similar to this mosquito thing where, at a climactic point in the movie, an actual giant plastic skeleton would come towards the audience on a string or whatever towards them. Shakarama, again, he had a similar thing. I can't remember what he called, Electro something, but it was a movie called The Tingler, and he wired up some seats in the theater to buzz during key moments of the movie. Somebody would be up there with a buzzer thing buzzing them. Every single one of these was actually done by him. So it's a neat nod to the past, and it's very realistic and appealing that these guys could like dig up all of this old equipment and reuse it for this horror marathon. And they do it with the help of this guy who shows up, who's this weird dude with a goatee, older man, and like a top hat and cane and everything, who comes in and says he was an old theater owner, and he has all of this old equipment from his theater that he's going to... Now, was he like a friend of one of them, or did he just show up mysteriously? Where did he come from?
Well, no, Toby knew him somehow. Toby brought him in.
Okay.
Dr. Malcolm something, I don't know. But it's Ray Walston. Again, this whole movie is full of familiar faces, especially if you were into horror at the time. But even, some of these people were mainstream, but Ray Walston, we have talked about before. He was in Galaxy of Terror. I always recognize him from the John Malkovich of Mice and Men. He played Candy in that. And he shows up just for a minute, really, to kind of explain the history of these old movies and these old movie houses.
We had theaters in those days, not like these cine, omni, multi, whatchamaplex things today, with 29 screens, the size of postage stamps. And we had fun. The ballyhoo, the giveaways, the bullshit. I could tell you stories. The point is, we put the butts in the seats where they belong. And they loved it.
They are at the Dreamland Theater, which is supposedly being torn down in 3 weeks, which makes absolutely no sense to me because it's beautiful. It's this gorgeous old movie house that doesn't seem to have anything wrong with it. I can't imagine why they're tearing it down. Dr. Malcolm does his spiel and tells them about all the history and stuff. Then there's a music montage where they do all of their cleaning and decorating. And the first thing they do is the seats are all covered in like these huge like paint drop cloths, and they pull them off to reveal these pristine theater seats. Like it's just this amazing theater that they are able to use. They decorate it, and it's just everything is so cool. The most amazing decorations and set pieces and props and effects and all kinds of things. The theater just looks fantastic when they are done, and they've all got these great costumes, amazing costumes, and they're all in character. And
they made the costumes, by the way, like they did like plaster casts of their faces and formed them. I mean, it's just all within, I guess, a couple days. I don't know.
Right. I mean, they made the montage makes it seem like they did it all in like one day.
Yeah, all within the course of one song. They basically got all this done.
But seriously, then there's a scene before the festival actually begins. Oh, they find in the prop trunk this movie reel. And the case that it's in says, "Caution, do not open," or something like that. But of course, they open it and they watch it, and it's this weird, surreal, like messed up art house kind of film.
The Possessor. Well, it turns out to be many of the same images that Maggie was seeing in her dream. It's a guy, he looks like Jesus, he's in white robes, and he's eventually, like, his head, like you said, is on a platter, and there's some close-ups on his eyes, and at one point in the film, there is like a slab and some candelabra, and it looks like kind of a sacrifice scene where he is pulling out a big wavy dagger and is about to stab a woman who's laid out on this thing. And there's some sounds and the possessor, some talking and things like that happening in there. And it weirds her out. Everybody else thinks it's kind of silly. And then it turns out that their advisor the next day says, oh, yeah, this must be the long-lost footage from this well-known kind of mythical film called The Possessor. And there was this guy... and his name was...
Lanyard Gates.
Lanyard Gates, who was this crazy filmmaker, and he put together this film and was showing it to some people and was enacting out at the same time the last scene from the film and having it shot. And he was actually going to kill somebody during this, but something went horribly wrong, and the whole theater burned down, knocked over a candelabra or something. The whole theater ends up burning down. And then they thought that this film had been lost forever, but of course it turned out in his trunk.
Yeah. I just thought it was funny, like the guy, Mr. Davis, their advisor or whatever, tells them that this guy, Lanyard Gates, was some sort of like cult film guru, and he led this group that used to drop acid and then make films. It's just... Which kind of funny.
Well, we talked about that earlier. I guess earlier we were talking about that guy who played the old man in Poltergeist 2.
Yeah.
They used to drop acid and do plays, not films.
Right. But similar.
Yeah.
And somehow I feel like he made the first part of the film and some people saw it and ridiculed him for it, and like the acting out of the final act was like his revenge or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. He didn't like
weird
to be laughed at. But whatever. Yeah, I mean, it's just like Maggie's dream, and she faints because it's so shocking to her. And the club decides as a group unanimously that it's too morbid to somebody suggests maybe we should show it, and they say no, it's too morbid. You know, nobody wants to watch a movie where some guy actually murdered his family and people actually died, so they shelve it. They decide they're not going to do it. But Maggie asks her mom about it, and her mom obviously, she knows.
She's super cagey.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of Lanyard Gates? What?
What?
No. Never in my life.
Lanyard who?
Yeah, right. I've never heard of him. By the way, I need you to drop out of this festival right now.
Yeah.
But the girl, Maggie's like, no, I can't. I'm too much in it. And the mom's like, okay, well, I guess I have to trust that you're, a big girl now. You can take care of yourself. But then after Maggie goes to bed, Suzanne, the mom, gets another call. And it's that creepy voice again. It says, I'm the possessor. I want her. And, Suzanne's like, no. But he says, well, if you want to stop me, I'm at the theater. You can come and you can bring your little gun like you did last time or whatever.
Okay.
So Suzanne goes off to the theater, and, here's Dee Wallace with her little purse gun, stalking around. And this is really kind of the only part of the movie that I have a serious issue with, because she shows up, all the lights on the outside on the marquee pop on. Okay, fine. But then all of the letters in the marquee shoot off at her. Mm-hmm. The marquee just magically changes to the possessor. A ticket automatically pops out of the ticket dispenser, and she takes it, and then the door automatically opens and she walks in. Now, ultimately, it turns out that this is just some crazy guy doing this. Mm-hmm. So How did he do all that?
It's pretty incongruous. Yeah, they're really playing a trick on you here. The filmmakers are trying to make this seem supernatural during this scene. And by the way, this scene is a great scene on its own.
Yeah.
You're right that it doesn't make sense with the continuity of the movie, but as a scene, it's really compelling and cool, and it's well shot, and it's well lit, and it's suspenseful, and it's got great camera angles and stuff. And, it's your typical, she's an idiot walking right into this trap.
Right.
And there's the movie showing on the screen, and she stands there and watches it and all this stuff. Anyway, she ends up like disappearing, essentially. Like we don't see her again until the end.
Well, she hears somebody running around. Of course, it's all dark around her. She hears somebody running around, and then she sees somebody coming towards her, which, again, I don't really understand.
Yeah.
She sees somebody coming towards her, and she shoots them, and, she's calling him Lanyard, so we know that she knows who this guy is. And she shoots him, and he falls, but then she, backs up against a projection screen, and these big arms pop through the screen and pull her away, and then we don't see her again, like you said, until the end of the movie. I'm still not sure, was the thing that she shot supposed to be a rigged up dummy or something?
I don't know.
Because it didn't look like it.
It's all pretty nebulous. It's just as nebulous as the possessor showing up on the marquee miraculously,
Well, and talking to her.
Yeah.
Which, again, when you know the end of the movie, it doesn't make any sense. But
no.
Whatever. I mean, it's a good spooky scene, so fine, whatever. And then Maggie wakes up in the morning, and I was, in my mind, even though I've seen this before, it's been so long I couldn't remember, I'm thinking, won't she think it's weird that her mom's not there in the morning? But she wakes up, and, breakfast is all prepared for her, and there's a note from her mom that's like, tonight's the night, good luck.
Uh-huh.
So, all right.
How did that happen? I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, the movie has a very Scream vibe to it, a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Just the way it starts with her kind of and the pacing of the movie is a lot like the pacing of Scream as well. I bet it's like Pink Floyd, right? You know how if you play The Wall... No,
right,
you played Dark Side of the Moon.
Dark Side of the Moon.
Along with Wizard of Oz. I think if you played Scream along with this movie and you started them at the same time, it's like they hit the same beats.
Yeah.
It sure feels like it,
It's funny, I hadn't made that connection, and now that you say it, they're very much alike with the backstory and, this killer out for what turns out to be revenge, and
all these teenagers, and they're all friends, and then it turns out, spoiler alert, that one of their friends is actually the guy.
Right. That leads us into the festival, which we've already talked about, but I can't say enough, you say these people are in costumes. We're not talking about lazy throw a sheet over your head costumes. We're talking about intricate, somebody took time to put these costumes together. One of my favorites was the guy who, I don't know, he kind of looks like a mad scientist, but he has an extra prosthetic head, growing out of his shoulder, and the head can vomit on command. That was awesome.
But with the nice 80s touch of both him and the head wearing dark shades.
Yeah.
This movie, it was like everybody who was coming to this thing, raided the warehouse down at Paramount or something. They needed another scene of a break-in at the props closet at 21st Century Fox or something like that.
Yeah.
To explain how everybody got these wonderful, gorgeous, incredible costumes for this. It's this thing.
It's like Comic-Con for 50s and 60s B movies. Everybody looks like they could have stepped out. Not everybody's in costume, but a lot of them are, and it looks great. And all of the members of the club who are sponsoring this, they're all in costume and playing roles. And it's so much fun. When I was in college, we did a screening of the Rocky Horror Picture Show. The theater department hosted one, and we all dressed up as the characters and played the parts and whatnot. And that was really fun, and that's the only, similar experience that I have to this. But that, compared to this, was totally low budget and lame. This is amazing. I would buy my ticket for this today if it were happening.
It's so
and
true.
They're showing these movies, and they've got this great clock that is kind of a skeleton that's squeezing a heart, and blood drips out of the heart. And every time the clock screams, that means the next movie's about to begin. And they start showing these movies. And the first one that they show is Mosquito. These movies, they show us some fairly extensive footage from these movies.
Yeah.
And it's all original footage. Like, these aren't real movies. I mean, all of them are inspired by actual movies from the 50s and 60s, or at least I believe they are.
Yep.
But, they shot these for this movie, and they're so fun.
They are.
Like, they're so much fun.
They are, because they're satire, but they're still like, these movies really, to satire these movies doesn't take a lot,
right?
You just basically have to make a movie like that, and you've got your satire, and that's what these films do. So it's just these real earnest actors driving down country roads talking about mosquitoes and
What in tarnations could have done this, Doc? There's nary a drop of blood left in any of my sheep.
Beats me, Skater. Wait a minute. Look at this large puncture wound in the back of her neck.
a giant mosquito attacks the top of this pickup truck, or was it a convertible? I don't know.
It was a pickup truck because the mosquito grabs on. Well, and just like, you know, they do all the old school effects where, you know, there's the shot of the people in the truck where obviously they're just in front of a screen and like somebody is off the side of the truck, like, you know, pushing a board underneath to make it, you know, shake to look like they're driving. And then it's a cut completely away from the truck to show the mosquito flying. So there's no like size perspective or anything. It's just because the mosquito's so huge on the screen, we believe that it's a huge mosquito. And you can clearly see the ropes and like there's no realism to it at all. I mean, you know, it's clearly a prop on strings, but then they, you know, make a big noise on the top of the trucks and bring some legs down over the top so we know it's on the top, and then they cut to the mosquito, you know, on the top of the truck, but we don't see the actors anymore. And it's just, you know, all these movie tricks that they did, and then the mosquito drills its, I don't know, sucker like down into the truck and into the farmer guy's head, and like
Stinger, Craig. It's called
sucks all its blood out. Mosquitoes don't sting, Todd.
They don't? Oh, please. What do they do then?
I don't know. Oh. They're not bees. This isn't a giant
there's
bee
a difference.
movie.
Oh, okay.
Well, whatever. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, it was just so much. And I'm not, you know, like...
You're not into these, like I am.
No. Well, it's not that I'm not into them. It's just that I've not had a lot of exposure. Like, I've not sat down and watched them. I appreciate them for what they are. And in small doses, you know, I've watched clips. And I'm also a big fan of Mystery Science Theater 3000. They do these movies sometimes. So I've seen them in that context. But that was another part of why this was fun.
Yeah.
Because it's all happening in this festival atmosphere. So the audience is very much interacting. They're yelling at the screens. They're riffing on it. They're throwing popcorn and... I don't know. I mean, it just seemed like a blast.
Yeah, you would want to be there. You wouldn't want to be the guy activating the mosquito. What I guess is it's their advisor, right?
Yeah.
Who's the one operating the mosquito by a remote control and eventually swings it down towards the audience on this big wire that goes across the crowd. And it lights up, and it's actually a really cool prop, and it also has a big stinger. Yeah. And so it kind of swings in front of them. But then above him on the catwalks, even higher catwalks, you see a guy with another remote. And he takes over, basically, and turns the mosquito back around, and the mosquito flies up into the flies to stab him. Mm-hmm. And it's a pretty brutal little scene there where he stabs him right through the chest and kills him. And then you see from overhead this big burly figure with a hat on and a coat who drags him away, drags the body away. Now, this same figure showed up to Maggie in the beginning. Maggie was doing tickets in the ticket office.
Yeah.
There's a guy who came up and said, "One, please, I'm really looking forward to seeing The Possessor," or something like that. And before she could look up...
And he calls her Sarah.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, yeah, that's important. He calls her Sarah. And then before she can look up, he disappears. And so while this whole festival is going on, now Maggie is sort of singularly focused on trying to find this guy because she thinks he might be, I guess she says she thinks he might be killing people, right? She thinks there's a killer on the loose.
Yeah,
even though I don't think she has any evidence that this could go on.
I don't know. She kind of figures things out really fast, or at least like she gets on the right trail really fast. Like she's like, oh my gosh, it must be Lanyard Gates. Oh, well, yeah, I guess it must be if you say so. I mean, like everybody thought he was dead, but apparently you saw one guy, and so it must be him. Well,
they take him.
Right.
They take her a little too seriously. Yeah, she takes.
And like the guy. I mean, we don't really get to see him in the beginning, but like when he goes to grab the ticket, his hands have burn scars. So,
yeah,
you know, supposedly this guy died in a fire, and it comes out later that they never actually found the body. So, sure, it could be him, but she just gets there really fast.
Yeah.
You know, I was also getting major shades of the Phantom of the Opera. I mean, like,
sure.
That's basically kind of what the story is to a large extent. This mutilated guy kind of haunting this theater and seeking out, you know, his revenge or whatever it is that he wants. In this case, you know, in Phantom of the Opera, it's, you know, he's going for the girl for romantic purposes, and this one it's not for romantic purposes, but he's still going for the girl, and very much a Phantom of the Opera vibe.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think a couple of the filmmakers, the guys who directed this, Mark Harrier is the guy that's credited for directing it, but I guess that at some point he was let go, and another guy named Alan Ormsby, he ended up being uncredited, but I guess he did a lot of the work on it. And I don't remember which one it was, but one of the other of them was either the writer or the director of a version of Phantom of the Opera starring Robert Englund, which I haven't seen.
Yeah. I think you might have it reversed. I thought it was Alan Ormsby who started out directing it, and then later on, Mark was brought on.
Oh, maybe that's why Ormsby's uncredited.
Well, Ormsby did write this, and he actually. He's a good friend, apparently, of Bob Clark's. We've talked about Bob Clark on here before.
Oh, yeah.
And he worked very closely with Bob Clark on some of their earlier efforts, like, you know, their sort of no-budget, kind of bargain basement movies that they did that led to bigger and bigger things. Like, I think the first one they worked on was Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things.
Yep.
And actually, Alan Ormsby went on to write Mulan as well. So,
yeah.
At least some of it, not the whole thing.
Some of it,
pieces
right.
of it. And so, you know, he's not bad. I guess he just didn't cut the mustard. It's not really clear. Nothing that I read online says exactly why he was booted out of it. But I guess Bob Clark at some point had some hands in this. Like either he was brought in to direct one of those sequences, or there were some rumors that he came in and he directed portions of the movie himself when things were in trouble. It has a real storied history, and I didn't get to see it, but apparently on the DVD version of it, there's a whole featurette that people said goes into honest detail about what happened behind the scenes of this movie. I wish I had been able to find it before we had this podcast, but I couldn't find it. But yeah, it would be really interesting to know.
Well, and you know, after I agree. You know, I was getting ready to go on with the plot, but I do want to say I agree. You know, it does seem like there are lots of stories behind this movie that I just couldn't find the answers to. You know, replacing the lead actress so late into the movie, replacing the director, and I have no idea if those two things coincided or had anything to do with one another. But it would be nice to have some. So, listeners, if you know any of these answers, share them with us. We're genuinely curious. But after Mr. Davis gets killed, we see the killer make a Mr. Davis mask. Now, having watched this before, I, at this point, kind of felt like the movie gave us a major hint to who the killer was super early in the movie. Because when they're setting up for the festival, I won't say who, just in case you don't want spoilers until we get to the end of the podcast, but one of the characters is making these plaster masks in that setup scene. So if you're paying attention, you know who has the skills to make these masks. But anyway, so they make a mask of Mr. Davis. And then we get the next movie, which is Attack of the Amazing Electrified Man, which, you know, is very much in the same vein as Mosquito. It's this crazy guy. It's basically kind of the movie Shocker.
Yeah, although I felt like it had this weird kind of German expressionistic silent film vibe to it. It was a little like the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari or like Metropolis and some of the... I mean, there was talking in it, but then there are points when, there's just these odd set pieces and the guy's just walking and emoting and you know what I'm talking about?
No.
You don't even know the movies I'm referencing. What are you talking about?
I've heard of them.
It's a weird mix of this B movie / German, postmodern filmmaking that goes even further back. So I thought it was one of the more bizarre of the three movies that we saw, in that it was hard for me to pinpoint exactly what movie they were parodying there.
Yes, and I do think that it's interesting that you say that, because all of the movies could have been entirely similar, and that would have been fine. But they do give them somewhat distinctive qualities. And if you're right that this one does have, a German or whatever sort of influence, it makes sense then that the last movie, The Stench, is kind of a Asian horror film.
It's like an overdubbed monster movie from Japan.
Right.
It's hilarious. I wish we had seen more of that one, to be honest. That was the one I was the most interested in seeing more of, and that was the one we only saw a couple scenes from.
Yeah, it's true. This movie is billed, at least on IMDb, I don't know how it was marketed, but it's billed on IMDb as a horror comedy. And I can see that, though it's not, and I don't think that it was intended to be, a laugh-out-loud comedy. But there are funny parts of it. And one of them is, Maggie's pseudo-boyfriend shows up at the theater with another girl, but then when he sees that Maggie is there, he goes to kind of try to flirt with her, and when he comes back, some big guy has taken his seat next to the sleazy girl that he's there with, and there's an interaction between them where the big guy stands up and knocks Mark out. And it's barely worth even mentioning, except for I want you all out there in the world to know that there are comedic elements of this movie too.
Yeah, beyond a guy getting stabbed with a giant mosquito, there are other comedic.
I saw, I was reading in viewer reviews, not, professional critics, just everyday Joes, and somebody said it's kind of amazing that a horror movie with few to no jump scares, no gore, really, and no boobies can be as entertaining as this movie is. and I agree. It's really not gory. I mean, there's some imagery that's maybe, a little strange, but there's not a lot of blood, certainly no intense violence, no overt sexual stuff going on here. But I did find I was entertained throughout. I was not bored. I thought it was a fun romp. And little things, my favorite. Well, okay, so during the Shocker movie, Maggie is listening to her own tape recorder, and the scary voice comes on and says, "Your life has been a dream. You are possessed." And she's like, "Ah." But then Bud is the guy in the wheelchair, and I recognized him too, and I thought, oh, again, he must have been in a million things because he's so recognizable to me. No, just a couple of things that I remember. He was in The Curse. Did you ever see The Curse with Will Wheaton from the 80s?
I haven't seen it, but it's on my I think it's on our list too. We're going to do it
It's
someday.
not good, but I love it. But he plays the older brother in that. He's like shocking people. And then Tina, who is the blonde kind of sex pot one, she's played by Freddie Simpson. Again, recognized her, looked her up. She played Ellen Sue in League of Their Own, the pretty blonde one from A League of Their Own. Anyway, she goes off and she's looking for Mr. Davis, and she finds him. We, of course, know that it's really the killer in a Mr. Davis face mask. I also didn't quite understand this. Is he making latex masks, or is he like preserving their faces and wearing their faces.
I think he's making latex masks. I'm pretty sure that's what he's doing because he's pulling them on and off like makeup, and he's got his own, obviously.
Yeah.
You know, there's that one scene. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what he's doing.
All right, makes sense. Anyway, so she like flirts with him and starts making out with him, and like it is latex because when they are making out, like, I don't know if it sticks to her face or what, but like she pulls away from him and like it's stuck to her face and it's all stringy and sticky, and he kills her. I don't know how, but then he holds her up like a puppet and he uses her to talk to Maggie and Mark
in the shadows.
I thought that was really funny.
It's funny. It is a little funny when you describe it. It's pretty disturbing when you see it. And
it is.
Like you said, the movie doesn't have a lot of gore, but the scenes that we're describing actually do come across as a bit disturbing. Like, even her peeling his face mask kind of away is really pretty upsetting. And even the guy getting stabbed with the mosquito, and later on the mosquito comes in, and what I thought was one of the more shocking scenes of the movie. Yeah, all of these things, they sound really silly, but without the gore even, it just strikes an interesting balance, I think.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, it kind of works. Against all odds, it all really worked for me.
Oh, I think it definitely works. I mean, it looks good. It's done well. It's shot well. It looks cool.
And
I'm not complaining at all. I enjoyed it.
You know, now that we're talking about it, this movie owes a great debt to an earlier movie too, an earlier Vincent Price movie called The Abominable Dr. Phibes. Have you ever seen that?
No, I know what it is, but I've never seen
we have to do it on here. Okay, the villain is very reminiscent of the Abominable Phibes. But the other aspect of it that's so interesting is that the method in which they kill people are slightly comic, but also disturbing and also fitting to the plot and what's going on. This is so Phibes. Like, there's just this dark comedy about it. And the bit where they kill Bud is, straight out of that as well. Here is Bud in a wheelchair, sitting in the box seats or whatever, operating the Shakorama console, zapping people in their seats, which, by the way, it's not like a simple buzzer. It's not like a simple shock. It's like mini explosions going off underneath these people's seats below. It's really...
And like it's so much that you can see the electricity, like there's sparks.
Yeah, it's pretty dramatic, and that would actually be pretty awesome, but as well as probably illegal.
Yeah.
But so anyway, the killer comes up behind him and straps him down and puts clamps on his chair. He's turning his chair into an electric chair, which is quite clever. Yeah. But then he slaps a tape recorder in front of him and hits play. It's frickin' Saw, man.
Well, Bud, you'll get a charge out of this. Watch the panel. The lights will go on in the following order. Red, blue, green. What's that? Green, blue, I forget. But the important light is that yellow one. When it turns on, Bud, so do you.
It's Saw. It's even like the same voice.
Oh, yeah.
He hits play on it, and he says, now you will be. And he basically runs down what's going to happen to him, that as these lights on the console turn on, once it gets to this certain light, he's going to get fried. And so he runs away, and this guy, Bud, is struggling to like reach something on the console to yank it out, but he doesn't get there in time. It's like a total Saw setup.
It is.
From the tape recorder and everything.
And the scene was tense because you see these lights coming on, and you know that when the last one comes on, he's supposed to get electrocuted. Meanwhile, he's struggling with his hand, which is strapped down to his wheelchair. He's struggling with his hand to try to unplug the socket or whatever, and he's so close. And he's so close for so long. You're just like, come on, you can do it. You can do it. But he can't do it. And so when the guy on the screen gets electrocuted, he gets electrocuted too. And it probably wasn't a particularly expensive effect, but I thought it looked good. I mean, this is such a drive-in movie, I didn't even consciously do it, but you forgive maybe some little things here because so maybe the electricity, encasing his body didn't look particularly authentic, but it looked fun. Like, it was a cool looking effect, and I don't know.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. But right before he's electrocuted, I have to give a shout out to my favorite line, and I remember this from when I was a kid. We quoted this all the time, and it's just in the background. It's just the crowd riffing on the movie. But somebody in the movie says, "Kiss me, Dick," and somebody in the audience goes, "Kiss your what?" And I just remember us saying that all the time when we were kids.
He's coming this way.
Kiss me, Dick.
Kiss your what?
Apropos of nothing, but hilarious.
Oh, well.
And then Maggie goes to Toby and is like, "Oh, this is happening. You know, the bad guy's here." And he's like, "Oh, okay, well, we definitely should call the police, but first we need to go downstairs and get the lights back on, because when there was, you know, the electrocution or whatever, the power went out." She's like, "First we have to go downstairs and get the lights back on." And so he takes her down to the basement.
But wait. While the power is out, the way that they're entertaining the crowds is they're bringing some Jamaican band up on stage to play reggae?
Yes. And we missed it at the beginning. Like, when the festival first started, there was just a random rap guy outside the theater too who did this like reggae rap, and it was pretty amazing.
Apparently they filmed this in Jamaica, so they must have used like local talent to come in and jump into this movie, which is always fun.
I loved it. I loved the music in this movie.
It's such a non sequitur though. I mean, it's so out of left field.
Oh my gosh, but the crowd is so into it, and everybody's dancing and having a great time. Again, wish I was there. But like, even in the music montage in the beginning when they're setting up the theater, it's all set to that oldie. I don't know who originally did it, but Saturday Night at the Movies. And it was just the perfect atmosphere for what was going on. And then at the end of the movie, as was often the case in these 80s movies, there's an original song that references, you know, the movie. And oh my gosh, it was good throughout.
It's a real throwback. It's quite nice.
Yeah. But anyway, Toby takes Maggie downstairs where the lights are out and their flashlight goes out or something, and he disappears. And then for a split second, she sees Mr. Davis, like, slide through a door. And then she sees Tina, like, I don't know, just out of the corner of her eye or something. The stench is playing upstairs. Like you said, we don't get to see too much of this, which is unfortunate. But I love that gag, like the smell-o-vision gag where they pump in the odors through fog, through different things in the theater. Love it. And then here it is. It's the big reveal. All along, dun dun dun, it's been Toby.
Yeah.
And the reasoning behind it is that his mother was a member of Lanyard Gates's cult, and they had been sitting in the front row of the Possessor when all of this went down. Gates did kill Maggie's mother on stage in front of everybody, but then Maggie's aunt, Suzanne, came in and rescued her, and somehow a candelabra got turned over and the whole place went up in flames. Toby's mother died in the fire, but he was saved, but he was severely burned over like 90% of his body. And he's gone through his whole life, you know, being this monstrous thing, that, you know, undergoing these terrible reconstructive surgeries. We see him in his true form. He also shows her, he gives her a demonstration of how he puts on the masks, and he uses, again, just like Scream, like voice changing technology to change his voice. And so he gives her a little show, you know, of the different masks and things. But we see him in his natural form, and he's all burned. And I thought his makeup looked great, and I thought that Tom Villard did an amazing job in this performance.
Fantastic in this movie. I mean, he was compelling. And these scenes were kind of long, and maybe even a little too long. Like, there was a lot of exposition. There was a lot of him running around. He throws on like 5 different faces, and it goes on forever. But gosh darn it, this guy is really good. And it was really fun to watch him get unhinged, you know, and kind of go nuts.
It's my scarecrow in Oz face. Cute, huh?
You're crazy.
What? This just dawned on you? That's great. And I'm the one who's crazy. Can't say I've lost my sense of humor. Can you?
You're right. This is where it really feels very Phantom of the Opera-like. And his makeup is good, and he's going crazy. You know, I feel really bad because Tom Villard, he didn't live very long. He died a few years after this, and apparently, you know, this is back in the late 80s, early 90s, when AIDS was huge. Like, you had AIDS and you had a death sentence. And he confessed to the director, I guess, of this film on his first day of shooting that he had AIDS, which would have been probably something that he was keeping hidden.
Oh, yeah.
At that point. So it's really quite tragic. I would love to. This guy could have been the next Tom Hanks, you know? I mean.
Oh, gosh. He was really talented. I mean, he was really big. You say Tom Hanks, I'm thinking more along the lines of like Jim Carrey. Like, huge choices, really bold choices. And Jim Carrey kind of grates at my nerves sometimes. I think that he's very talented, but I can't deal with the whole Ace Ventura energy. But this guy, he makes those big, bold choices, and he really... You know, he seems unhinged.
Mm-hmm.
He plays it very well. And also just enough sympathetic in ways, even though he is the killer and the villain of the movie, he's kind of a tragic villain. He's kind of been he was a kid when this happened to him, and it's something that he's had to live with, and ultimately, you know, he's totally nutso, but what he says is, I want to recreate that night. I want to finish the movie, because if I finish the movie, then none of it happened, and everything will be okay. Now, of course, obviously, that's not true. You know, that's entirely delusional.
And she has my favorite line in the movie. She looks at him and says, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And cut away. Oh my gosh, that was a brilliant moment.
It was great. It was great. But so anyway, so that's what he does. He puts on Possessor, which, you know, the audience is like, what is this crap? And they are back behind the screen. I love these scenes in movies where people are behind the projection screen in a movie theater. It's just it's such a great backdrop, you know, for a scene.
Yeah.
Just when the movie ends, which is when, you know, the fire would have happened or whatever. Again, continuity-wise, it doesn't really make any sense, I don't think. The projection screen raises, and there he is, and he's got the whole set up. And he is going to sacrifice Sarah/Maggie, and he plays to the audience like, ha, I was going to kill her, but do you really want me to, or do you want me to spare the poor virgin? And of course, then the audience goes wild. They're like, kill her.
Yeah, they think it's just part of the show, you know? I mean,
right.
It's so smart, right? He's going to kill this woman in front of them, and they're not going to even realize it.
Right. Oh, and they're
into it,
applauding,
well,
and yeah, they're totally into it.
Yeah, they're egging him on, and you know, as a viewer, you watch this and you're like, geez, how are they going to get out of this one because of that fact? You know, there's nobody's going to rush to stage and save her because nobody thinks there's a problem, and they're just he's just feeding on their energy, which is making him even worse and worse and worse. It's really cool scene, I think.
It is, and Tom Villard has great energy, and he really is playing the crowd, and he's big and over the top, and a good performer. I would have been excited. I would have been telling him to kill her.
Yeah, stab her.
and he rolls out Suzanne like in a full body cast with the gun pointed at him. So, you know, Dee Wallace is just on stage with, you know, tape on her mouth. She doesn't have anything to do, but there she is. And Mark, the pseudo-boyfriend, saves the day. He's like up, I don't know, near the projection booth or something, and he takes off his belt and he uses it to zip line down the cords that the mosquito was on. And when he zip lines down, somehow he activates the mosquito, and the mosquito impales the bad guy, and then he like is swinging impaled on the mosquito, and the crowd is going nuts.
No. It's so disturbing. This is the most disturbing part of the movie for me. And I mean, it's just a movie, but like, yeah, this guy gets impaled and he's swinging on this thing, and the crowd doesn't even know that this was a real murder they just watched. Everything about it's just really twisted, as well as funny.
Yeah. And that's pretty much it. I mean, there's just a little end cap where they are all outside with police and ambulances and stuff. But ultimately, everybody's okay. I hate that we never mentioned there's one character named Cheryl who's played by Kelly Jo Minter, who I just really like. She was in our very first episode, People Under the Stairs.
Yes.
She was in that movie. She was also in Nightmare on Elm Street 5. She's in this movie, and she's such a small character, but she's compelling every time she's on screen. She gets an opportunity to kick a little bit of ass at one point. She knocks out the big guy that had knocked out Mark in a really funny scene. So I just wanted to throw her out there because I really enjoy her. But overall, I think this is a really fun movie. I just think it's super fun. It's not a masterpiece. It's not great. But even though it pays homage to a lot of other films, I think that it's unique in its own way. It's well acted. I think as far as cinematography goes, it's got some really good moments. I think in other moments it's, just semi-average. But the story is fun. It's never... I don't know. You said you thought there were some parts that dragged a little bit. I really didn't. I didn't think that it was boring at all. I was into it. The villain was great and was, played so well and looked good and homage to all the movies of the 50s and 60s. It just had so many things that were appealing to me that I just really enjoyed it, and I would wholeheartedly recommend it to horror fans. I just think it's a really, really fun movie.
Yeah, I did not expect to enjoy this movie as much as I did. I really didn't, especially because, you don't hear anything about it. Right?
Not really.
This is the kind of movie that really should be one of those little cult classics that people talk about a lot or look back fondly, and it just never got to that point.
Right.
Doesn't even have I guess it had a DVD release fairly recently. I wish we had been able to acquire that copy of it because I'm sure it looks a lot better than what we ended up seeing. What we ended up seeing had almost kind of a grindhouse quality to it. I don't know if it was a VHS rip or what, but the whole movie itself looked again like a drive-in film we were watching. But no, and then to kind of hear all the interesting stories behind it, it sounds like it's a miracle it was made. So it's just kind of a nice, fun little surprise package that I really enjoyed watching as well this week.
Yeah, me too. I hope I'm not overselling it because, again, it's not amazing in terms of quality. It's just really fun. Those of you out there, I feel like we kind of failed you this week. We didn't have as much behind-the-scenes stuff to talk about as we usually do. And that's disappointing. So honestly, if you know any fun facts about this movie, I am genuinely curious. Leave a message on our Facebook page or wherever you want to, and let us know if you can give us any insight.
Yeah, or if you could upload that featurette if you might have it on here. I don't want to encourage this sort of thing, but YouTube's a great resource. Well, thank you again for listening to another episode. If you enjoyed it, please share it with a friend. You can find us on Facebook. Just search for Two Guys and a Chainsaw. Also on our website, twoguys.red40net.com, where you can peruse all of our back episodes. We're coming up dangerously close to 200 here. So if you have some ideas of what we should do for our 200th episode or any episode coming up, we love getting your requests. Just shoot us a message on either one of those channels and we'll get it. We love hearing from you. Until next time, I'm Todd.
And I'm Craig.
With Two Guys and a Chainsaw.